Hello, everyone. I'm Mr. Miller, and today I'm going to tell you a little bit about my identity, where I come from, where I am, and where I'm going. And I'm going to sort of frame this with the idea of learning. That's going to be sort of something I talk about throughout this video. And I'll start off by telling you a little bit about where my learning process started. So the first slide here I'm going to be sharing with you is about where I'm from. All right, so I come from a family of teachers. These are my parents here, and they both taught in the California Central Valley. We grew up in a town called Delano. That's a little picture up there in the upper right-hand corner of the city. And this city is definitely a little melting pot. It is a community comprised of a lot of farm working, so that you have a lot of the upper-class families own the farms and the ranches. And then it is a home to a lot of Latino and Filipino immigrants. Those are the two flags that I have on the bottom there. So growing up and going to school, going to elementary school there, I had a lot of friends that were from those communities that were Latino or Filipino. I didn't really relate a lot to a lot of my white classmates because they ended up being from slightly wealthier families. And my family was actually not quite as wealthy because my parents were both teachers. So we lived a much more humble lifestyle. So I ended up spending a lot more time with those members of the immigrant community. And it was a really great experience for me. I'm so grateful for that. Not only because I got to experience their fantastic food, their fantastic culture, and their very giving and welcoming families, but because I got to learn a lot and really kind of made me more humble and made me more aware of the experiences people go through. And the connection I want to make to this, to one of the texts that we read this year, is to the Book of Unknown Americans, the excerpts from the Book of Unknown Americans. Not because I had a similar experience to anybody in that book, but because I saw those experiences happening around me. I saw members of these immigrant minority communities sort of forming these little bubbles of community around themselves and around their families and their extended families, and trying to integrate with each other and experiencing a little bit of the racism and the discrimination that they would experience as immigrants. And being able to see that and being able to learn from their experiences really made me want to be aware and make sure that that was not perpetuated in the life that I led. I also learned, this idea that the California dream is something that involves this melting pot, involves a variety of cultures, but there are huge restraints behind the American dream in California because of the job availabilities and because of property value, because it costs so much to live in parts of the state. And so that's really where I started to learn this and where I started to form my identity with my parents. Moving into where I am now, obviously, that kind of leads to this first bit on the left here, that I'm a teacher. Obviously, Lynbrook is my home as an educator, and I plan for it to be for the foreseeable future. I also consider myself a friend and, of course, a husband and father. These images here are a couple of my graduates a couple of years ago at Lynbrook. This picture here is of me and my friends hiking in the mountains of Seattle. I really try to make sure that I prioritize my friendships, even though I do have these huge other responsibilities in my life, such as being a teacher and being a father and a husband. Friends are very important to me, and I make sure to make time for them. So obviously the role of being a husband and a father is one of the biggest things for me. This is my son Aiden here in the hole, and he will be turning 3 in July. This is my wife, Mrs. Miller. As many of you know, she's also a teacher at Lynbrook. And one of the huge benefits that I've learned in being with her, and one of the huge benefits of getting married to her a little bit later in life, is that we got to have similar priorities by the time that we met. We had our lives figured out. We were both teachers at Lynbrook. And that's where we met. And I want to draw a parallel from my experience with my wife, to the first text that we read this year, A Raisin in the Sun, not for any cultural or racial reasons, but just because of this idea of a family and marriage. Because in that story, Walter and his wife, Ruth, they struggled a lot with not seeing eye to eye and not having their priorities straight and not having similar life priorities. And so they didn't speak to one another. They didn't have the same goals. And I'm lucky to say that my wife and I do. And that's because we really did that on our own before we got together. We had our lives figured out, and we had our priorities and goals figured out, and we're honest with one another. So moving into my last bit is obviously where I'm going, what comes next for me. I'm going to obviously continue being a father and a husband, watching my son grow. I'm learning a lot from him. I mentioned I was going to mention learning a lot. I learn from everyone around me. I learn from my wife every day. I learn from my son every day. He shows me things about the world I've never seen before. Obviously, I want to continue to grow as a teacher as well. I want to continue to learn from my students at Lynbrook. I'm going to be moving into teaching AP for the first time next year, so I am going to have to continue to learn as a teacher, and I'm going to learn a lot from those students as well. And I hope to travel. This bit at the top is kind of my last point there. I love traveling. I love the idea of being a global citizen, learning about the world around us by going there, by experiencing the foods and cultures of other countries. And I want that for my son. So as soon as COVID is a little bit more in our hindsight, I hope to start traveling more and more with my son and showing him the world so that he can learn from the world around him. So I hope that you have learned a little bit about me from this video, and I hope that you can take some of these ideas and help them to enrich your own lives. Thank you very much.